With a Boxer. For those of you who haven't met me yet, I'm Derek Nagley. I am one of the associate directors here in the admissions office, and I get to host today's Lunch with a Boxer, where we will be talking with Graham Turner about our student counseling center here on campus. A couple of housekeeping things before we get started. First of all, this is being recorded. This is because some families are not able to hop on at this hour, so we want to make sure any questions they've sent in get answered, or that they can get their questions answered later on. So if you do have any questions throughout the session, please feel free to put them into the chat box. You can send them to the group as a whole or to myself directly, and I will make sure I read those aloud to Graham so that he's able to answer those questions and make sure that they get answered in a way that everyone hears on the recording. So please feel free to put in any questions you might have. We will also stick around for a few minutes at the end and turn off the recording just in case you have any really specific questions about your personal situation. We don't want to gloss over that, so we will turn off the recording towards the end. But for the main part, please feel free to put them into the chat and we can get those answered. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Graham Turner to tell us a little bit about the Student Counseling Center, and then I will be back to ask you lots of questions.
Wonderful. Sounds great, Derek. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Graham Turner, and I work in the Student Counseling Center. I'm the university's mental health promotion and prevention specialist. So it's a non-clinical position, although I do have a clinical background. My job in particular handles 3 areas of alcohol and other substance use education, mental health promotion, and suicide prevention, postvention. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the counseling center and the services that are available through that while you or your student is here at Pacific. The counseling center is on campus. We actually have 2 offices. One of them is here in Forest Grove, and then our other office is in Hillsborough, which primarily serves the health professions campus. We have our own building where we share our building with the Student Health Center, which is right next door. We're probably a block from the UC, the University Center, so kind of the central part of the campus. The Counseling Center provides a number of different services, and they kind of go through different steps. One of the primary things that we provide, of course, is brief counseling services to students. Students who are incoming will pay something called the student support fee. That pays for a number of different things, but part of what that does is it allows the counseling center to provide free services to all students, as long as they're paying the student support fee. And typically, students access, for people who come consistently to counseling, on average, our students are accessing about 6 sessions every year. We don't have like an exact cap on sessions, but it is typically at about 10, where we might encourage people to, the counselor will work with a person to identify a provider in the community. One other thing that the Counseling Center also provides is if a student's interested in long-term psychotherapeutic care, we strongly recommend that they make an initial appointment with the Counseling Center because we have a really extensive referral network. And that way, the student gets to meet with one of the counselors here. They're usually about half an hour long. The clinician will get an idea of what the student is looking for and then can make like really specific recommendations and referrals for ongoing care. It is important to note that at no point would someone be like, well, you've reached 10 sessions, so it's done. That doesn't happen. There are always exceptions and circumstances, as often inside of things like mental health. And I mean, the national average for how many sessions, if you looked at every single mental health provider across the entire country, the average number of sessions that people go to a mental health counselor is 1. So I think we're hitting a pretty good average with about 6. We cover a broad variety of presenting concerns. And if you're curious about some of the more specific ones, you can look at the Counseling Center website. You can just go to the Pacific website and type in Counseling Center. When you look at that, there's a scope of practice page that covers what the Counseling Center can address and what we don't address, or what we might refer out for. We don't provide direct prescribing for psychotropic medication, things like ADHD, anxiety, and depression. And we can work really closely with the Student Health Center right next door to secure those prescriptions for you. your records in the counseling center, if you're a student, are protected by FERPA and HIPAA. FERPA is federal legislation that protects educational records. So what that means is if you would like any of that kind of coordination of care, or if you're coming from a therapist and want to connect to someone locally or connect to the counseling center, you'll have to sign paperwork, and that will allow us to do that kind of connecting. And sometimes students are nervous that it's like, do you share what I talk about with my professors or my athletic coach or things like that? And I just want to really strongly say, like, we do not do that. There are circumstances that allow us to breach that kind of confidentiality, but they are very rare, and usually require kind of an immediate threat of danger to either the individual or somebody else. The counseling center also provides things like support and group spaces. We're adding to our staffing actually this coming fall. We're bringing 2 additional clinicians on, so we're going to be able to expand those offerings. Right now, the 2 that we provide almost every single semester we have a Wise Mind and a Mindful Coping groups, and those are workshops. It's a 3 kind of workshop series, and with Mindful Coping is learning really kind of core foundational mindfulness practices to assist with managing with things like stress. And then the Wise Minds, if you're familiar with something called dialectical behavioral therapy, the Wise Minds is based off of that. And that's kind of helping people move between like high intensity logic thinking and high intensity emotional thinking. And the middle of that is wise thinking. And those are also there are pre-recorded versions of those. So students want to do them asynchronously. There are workbooks that are available. For myself, I table every single week in the UC, and usually they're like fun little challenges, or I'm quizzing people about like, what do you know about cannabis, and do you want to know more, and here's how to make safe choices. Our mental health promotion works from a harm reduction standpoint, which is the acknowledgement that a lot of people are going to engage with substances. And a really critical thing for incoming students is that a lot of students do not. It's a commonly held belief and myth that like everyone at college is going to drink and try drugs and like all the things. And that is true for some people. It is not true for everyone. And I can speak more to that if there are questions around that and things like that. I'm trying to think about the other thing that we offer. One of the big ones is we have a 24/7, 365 crisis and support line. What that is students, parents can also call that. It's primarily students who use it. Students can call that and they get connected to a professional counselor, and that information feeds back into the counseling center if the student would like. So what that allows for is follow-up care, or if they're contacting in crisis, that means that typically a student will receive follow-up care and attention from the counseling center. The counseling center also works very closely with our care team, and they respond to something called care referrals. As I imagine, if you're new parents or a new student coming, you're probably looking at the website a fair amount. At the very bottom of every single Pacific web page, there's a care and safety at Pacific. I'm actually going to scroll down right now on one just to make sure I'm saying it correctly because the name changed. There's the support and safety box at the bottom. That takes you to, if you're curious about some of the resources that we have for supporting students in distress, it takes you to an extensive resource list that we're happy to have available. Yeah, I think there's a lot of other different things, but I think that kind of covers the general stuff. How does that sound, Derek? Okay.
Links, the support and safety box and the student counseling center links are in the chat. And for those of you watching online, they're also down in the description of the event today.
Thank you. Wait, one quick thing. Sorry, I'm just remembering. I'll clarify too, especially with COVID and where we are now, something that's emerged in mental health spaces a lot is we provide teletherapy support as well. That's for students who are local, or maybe they're commuting and would like to access those services but are away from campus. It is important to understand, and this doesn't necessarily apply for a lot of undergraduates, but those services are not available outside of the state of Oregon. That's not something that we can get around. That's a professional ethics and federal regulations that don't allow us to do that. But we provide in-person and teletherapy. So yeah, sorry, Derek, I just want to make sure I get that one.
Questions come in. So just as I know you kind of mentioned it in going through, but a couple of the parents were wondering about what can you provide them? Like if their student goes in, is there any information you can provide them, or are they ever going to know that their student's seeking help?
That is a really good question. It's also a very common question for parents and caregivers. I'm going to be very direct and say, no, we won't say anything. Sometimes, especially with students who are like brand new first year students or transferring in, parents may want to assist their student with establishing care, like setting up a first appointment. Parents are more than welcome to assist their student with those things. And if you were to call the counseling center and say, can you tell me if my student has come to the appointment that we scheduled? We're not able to release that information. And I want to be clear, we would love to be able to share that kind of information with concerned parents and caregivers, and that information is covered by the student's FERPA rights. So we're not allowed to disclose that. To be very clear, if there were circumstances that required the breaching of the student's confidentiality to maintain their safety, we most definitely would take steps to do that. And one of the critical aspects that makes mental health care effective is that it is confidential. So yes, I appreciate the desire to kind of be like, is my student getting help? And like, I really want them to go. What parents and caregivers and family members can always do is you can call into the counseling center. And what we do is we'll take like a separate note that won't be attached necessarily to the student's file, but it will be within the clinical records of the counseling center. So if a parent would like to call in and share concerns or provide more information given a situation, they're always more than welcome to do that. And it can be frustrating to then encounter like, thank you for sharing that information. We're not going to share anything back. If you and your student have like worked on their mental health or there's an ongoing thing that they're working on, one thing that we do provide also is they can sign releases that allow us that kind of disclosure. And that should be a discussion between yourself and your student if you're curious about that. Well, also, I would again say one of the features of mental health therapy that makes it helpful is the confidentiality aspect.
Doing some like programming and tabling in the university center, do you do any programming within the residence halls themselves?
That is another great question. As of right now, no. But there is mental health programming in the residence halls and it filters in. So I work very closely with the RAs, like I provide them a lot of their mental health training and things like that. So the RAs actually work up kind of their own mental health projects for each of the residence halls and floors. And I provide guidance and support for a lot of those projects. And to be quite frank, a lot of our RAs are really on top of some of that stuff. So it's kind of like I let them, they run with it. They don't need to ask my permission. They work closely with their supervisors around this project as well. We have had a couple of kind of concerted efforts between the counseling center and the housing office. One of them this last year, we talked about sleep hygiene, which is just developing practices that support healthy and restorative sleep, which I laugh with students because the current medical advice is like, you shouldn't be exposed to the blue light coming from a screen for a full 90 minutes before you go to bed. And usually people are just like, that is impossible, which is fine. We did a project where students got to enter a raffle. They picked a particular kind of sleep promoting habit. So it might be, I'm gonna put my screen away 10 minutes before I go to bed, or I'm gonna play a white noise machine. And they got entered into a raffle and won a prize. Like it was like blankets and thermoses and tea and like all that kind of stuff. And then this coming year, those things will be expanded. We're going to be doing more of that. And then I work closely with RAs also to promote, like when the counseling center does do programming, it gets advertised in the residence halls.
Feel free to put them into the chat or send them to me directly. I'm glad to get those read aloud as well. Another question came in. Is there any way for someone on campus to refer a student to counseling? So an RA or a professor, is there any sort of situation where they might refer them over to you and then you guys reach out, or kind of what's the process there?
That's a really good question. And it also prompts me to share part of the counseling center services that I didn't highlight at the beginning. So Monday through Friday during the school year, the counseling center has urgent walk-in hours from noon to 1. What that means is that there are several clinicians who have set aside and blocked out that time so folks can walk in the door and expect to see, and it's not necessarily always within that hour, but usually within that day. Occasionally it might take another day, but they will be seen by someone for an initial consultation. And so yes, we strongly encourage, and it's not necessarily uncommon to have like a professor or a coach or a staff member walk someone over between noon and 1. They can also, I mean, to be very frank, I'm like, they can walk folks over when they need to. We encourage people to call ahead, just make sure that we can find time in our providers' schedules. So yes, people can refer people to the counseling center. Because it's confidential mental health services, again, it falls under that kind of piece of you can make the referral to the counseling center, but the counseling center will not initiate services with a student. They do need to come in or ask for those services. That's partly just in alignment with our professional ethics as well. And again, I would point people back to the support and safety button that's at the bottom of all Pacific pages. One of the things it leads you to is a care referral. And that's a well-established system at our university that allows staff, faculty, students, community members, practicum placements, internship supervisors, they can submit a care referral. And that's everything from like, I noticed this student was sleepy today and I'm worried about them because they've been sleepy for a week, up to I have concerns about this student and their ability to, take care of themselves. And the care team reviews those things and responds and provides resources and referrals. The initial outreach is usually just to kind of be like, hi, we've had a care referral for you. We just want to check in and see what we can do to connect you to resources. Partly, I do a fair amount of orienting for both undergraduate and graduate students. And one thing I really appreciate is the orientation process. There's so much information. So oftentimes it gets lost a little bit. So the referral process is something that works really well, and I think does a pretty effective job of supporting our students.
Open.
Yeah, during the school year, so that's fall to spring, we're open regular hours 9 to 5 in Forest Grove. The Hillsborough campus is a little different because the graduate program schedules are a little different. But yeah, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. During the weekend, the center is closed, but the 24/7 supporting crisis line is open and available all the time. And again, those calls do filter into the counseling center so we can kind of do that wraparound care. And there is, this is part of like the university's response structure, but there is always a senior clinician who is on call.
That if someone's looking for long-term care, you can help with that referral process. Are those referrals local, like Forest Grove, or is this something where a student's going to need to have a car to be able to travel?
Yes, to both. So for local referrals, there are a number of providers here in Forest Grove. It's not a huge number, but they are here. And Cornelius and Hillsborough, which are just down the road, it's a couple of miles, both have sizable therapeutic populations as well. If the folks present right now or folks watching later are aware, there's significantly high demand for mental health care right now and a shortage of mental health care providers. What that means is that a lot of folks are encountering long wait times. We here at the counseling center work we work really hard to make sure that our wait list gets addressed as quickly as possible. That's also partly why we practice our brief therapy model, is to make sure that we're reaching as many students who need it as possible. Sometimes referrals will be in Portland, and that's also, I don't want to sound like a broken record here, but that's partly why we encourage students to connect with the counseling center before looking at, your student or you are more than welcome to look for your own therapist, of course. And the counseling center has a fair number of resources and connections. So we can also help kind of identify like, well, if you do have a car and you're okay driving into Portland, that will expand your pool a little bit. You can take the bus into Hillsborough as well, and then the Max line connects you right into downtown. And, COVID being all of what it was, one of the things that had changed is that almost all mental health practitioners now are offering services via teletherapy. So that has opened up a lot more services for people. And yeah, I think that that's something that is a positive change that has occurred.
And then one more question came in. So if they know that's going to be a thing, is that so this family knows that they're going to need some long-term care, they want to make that connection. Can they do that before their students actually on campus, or do they need to wait? So for example, they're going to be coming in the fall, they're starting the process this summer. Can they reach out to you this summer to start the process, or do we need to wait till they're actually on campus?
This is a really good question. I would always suggest, like, feel free to call or email the counseling center. The way that, and this is partly about liability and coverage of mental health care, the way that it's currently structured is the students have immediate access to the counseling center when they start their first day of classes. And it's not actually like class, it extends into orientation, but it's kind of the first day on campus. So prior to arrival, you're more than welcome to reach out. And there are some like gray boundary things and again, I would strongly encourage people to reach out. The counseling center is usually pretty prompt about responding to inquiries and things like that. So then you can talk directly to a clinician and they'll be able to give you further guidance on that. Derek, does that feel like that answers that?
Very well, thank you.
Yeah.
And then it looks like the last question for right now is, do you have a sports psychologist on staff?
That is a great question. We don't have a sports psychologist on staff like here in the counseling center. Hello, little one. We do, the athletic department has a sports psychologist consultant on, I guess retainer is probably the word for it. Her name is Dr. Tamara Tasker. She and I work really closely together. We provide ongoing mental health outreach to athletic teams, and she works really closely with athletics and individual coaches and teams as well. If you are a student athlete, you will get to know Dr. Tasker. She is wonderful. We did our first year this last year we do grade specific athletic outreach. So it's kind of for first years, it's a little bit of like welcome to the team environment. Then we have things like coping with injury. What does it mean to succeed? And then as students begin to finish their time here at Pacific, one of the things we talk about is transitioning out of being a student athlete, which can be, it's I was a student athlete for part of my undergrad experience. Like, it's a built-in community, and it can be challenging to move away from that. And there are fortunately a lot of options for people to maintain those connections as they move along their life trajectory. I can't sing Dr. Tasker's praises high enough. She is wonderful and deeply insightful.
Awesome. Well, Graham, it looks like we got through all the questions. So thanks everyone so much for joining us today. We will again have all the links we talked about in the chat and in the description in the recording. I'm going to hit stop on the recording,